and see what happens here.
Okay,
I gotta turn this down. I don't know why it's still on. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, I thought I turned that off. So let's go to my desktop. There we go. Okay, so as you can see on page 22 at the very bottom, there are 22 different templates. And we sometimes call these sketches. I did one last week, but it wasn't actually one of these. I was just sharing how to use a template. And then I said, wow, why do I struggle every week trying to come up with a different topic? If I make this my basic topic and then build on it from there, we can have a lot more fun and do some different things. So I'm going to go in order. I'm going to try to go in order at least. And so I'm starting with this little guy right here. Okay, so if you're following along, again, it's page 22 in the annual catalog, and it's the very first template. So when we built the template, what I decided to do is I used some of the Wildly Flowering Designer Series paper. I just love the different patterns that this paper has. I think I used it last week too. I'm going to have to move on and, and use some different papers for you. But these are two of the designs, and you can see on the reverse side, we have some other different designs. So this has wood grain and some fun wood samples. So let me just you know what, I hate when I don't show you the whole packet, and it's hard for me to do that, but I can show you with the catalog. So let's go ahead and flip open to that page. It's part of the Wildly Flowering Suite, which can be found on page, of course it's all sticking together. Oops, that's not it. I think I'd have it down by now, but let's see. I thought that they were in alphabetical order, but they are not. Here it is. This is the Wildly Flowering Suite. So it has some stamps and some dies. It even has an embossing folder and some fun trinkets, which I don't have yet, but I will soon. But this is the Designer Series paper. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So I wanted to just correct what I was saying before, in that this Designer Series paper with the fun designs, that's this right here, but this is actually from, this piece here is from the Country Woods Designer Series paper. So, but anyway, I want to focus on the Wildly Flowering. I love that it uses the Moody Mauve paper cardstock and in the background. So that's what I'm sticking with. I'm going to use those pieces. And on the template, one of the things they don't give you on the template is the dimensions of the pieces that you'll use. So what they show, now I flipped away from it again, so I'm going to make myself crazy here, but you can see that it has two overlapping pieces of paper on a background, and then it has a bow and a little sentiment label there. So a standard that I always use is 3x4. And the reason I use 3x4 is that when I'm cutting my Designer Series paper, I can get 12 pieces of 3x4 paper out of that. If I make it too long, I can only get 8 or sometimes 9, depending upon the size. So I like to stick with the 3x4, and I've used this design many times, this style template, by just placing the Designer Series paper on various angles. You can decide which way you like it best. I am going to go ahead and go this way to make it. Okay, so again, this is just a regular card base, and I have some white to put on the inside of the card. Let's go ahead and do that. I always like to do that first, get it out of the way, try to keep my paper clean. And I'm using the basic white because the flowers are white. Okay, and so now I'm going to take that wood grain paper that I mentioned is from the Country Woods collection, not from the Wildly Flowering, but goes beautifully together. And they, on the template, put one piece going off to the right, and then the other piece either straight or off to the left. And you can see by using 3x4 pieces, you can really get a nice look with that overlap. Okay, now I could have used something more contrasting, like perhaps the wild wheat, but then I didn't feel like it would contrast enough with this, or I could have just used white or even the early espresso, but I went with the Moody Mauve because I like the Moody Mauve. Then I took a piece. This is let's see, this is 2 inches by 3/4 of an inch, this little piece, and again it's the Country Woods, and I'm using my Moody Mauve ink pad, and I pulled out my brand new Wonderful Thoughts. It's new to me. It was in the previous catalog. It also has some dies that cut out some of the sayings, but I like the font. I like the way they mix the fonts, and I just chose the Thinking of You for this card. So here we go. I'm just going to ink it up, tap, 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 and place it right into the center, hopefully getting it straight. Again, I have a camera in my face, so sometimes it's hard for me to aim it properly, but there we go. And I'm going to close that up and then just use a dimensional, or 2 if you wanted to. I'm just going to use 1 for the sake of time. And I'm going to put this, I'm going to put it off to the edge right here, just towards the edge. And then I'm going to use some of this fun jute. Now this jute is from the package of 2023 to 2025 in color jute trim, and you get all 5 of the in colors. And so I'm going to use the Moody Mauve. I'm just sticking with, I could have used the linen thread, which I was thinking about, but I wanted to use the jute. I have a lot of it. And I just want to show you a little tip with this. What I like to do is, rather than cut off a piece and guess and make my bow, I like to make the bow while it's still on the spool. And I use my fingernail to get it to straighten out a little bit. Okay, so now it's a little bit straighter. It's not as curly, because it gets curly when it's on the spool. And I'm just making a bow. And this jute is a nice texture. It's nice in between. It's not real thin, but it's not so thick that it's hard to work with. And it will lie nice and flat. And so here we go. Now I could have fiddled with it and had a little bit less hanging off, but I'm just going to go ahead and trim it. But by pulling it against my fingernail, it made it a little straighter and made it a little nicer to tie into a bow. And I'm going to take that bow and I'm going to use a glue dot. Here's a glue dot, and I'm going to grab one. This is an old package, so they're on the spool, and I'm just going to place it. I put the glue dot below where my sentiment strip is, and now I'm still fiddling with my bow. I always say God gave me 3 boys and no girls because I can't tie a bow. But anyway, so I'm just going to press that in, and here we go. So here's a very quick and easy card made with these 3x4 pieces of designer series paper layered onto a coordinating piece of cardstock. Now I said, okay, well that's nice, but what else can we do with this? So let's take a look. One thing that I like to do when I'm doing this kind of design is to layer each of those 3x4 pieces onto a piece of white cardstock, which will help make it pop. And that's what I did here. And these white pieces are 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. In hindsight, I probably would have done 3 1/8 by 4 1/8. I feel like the white is a little too much on here. But rather than try it again, I figured I would just go and show you how that looks. So this is exactly the same card. Okay, so it looks much different though, right? It pops a little bit more, but still pretty with those pretty designs. But then I said, well, there's lots more we could do, right? I'm sticking with all the same patterns. Okay, so using we have I'm going to pull all the things out here because I have a bunch of things I want to show you. We could use a piece of coordinating cardstock, designer series paper, and we could put it on as the background, okay? And then when we put it on as the background, I did this the way that I cut this paper. It looks like it should go this way, so that's what I'm going to do. So just because the sketch or the template is shown to you as going vertically, we can easily turn it and make it go horizontally. And so here we go. We'll just do that. And we'll take our little sentiment label, which is here somewhere. We would put it down here and put our bow on, and that would look great too. Okay. And if you don't want to use a full sheet of this designer series paper, I often don't, because when I do, I can only get 6 pieces. This is 4 by 5 1/4. I can only get 6 pieces from a sheet of 12 by 12 paper. And because I do so many classes and I need to make so many card kits, I try to stick with the slightly smaller pieces. So rather than use a piece of designer series paper, I took a piece of cardstock, same color, and I ran it through the layered florals. It's right next to me. Embossing folder, and you can see this is a super deep 3D embossing folder. And one of the reasons that I pulled it out today, I have to be honest, I like being a student. Okay. More probably than I even like teaching and stamping in general. I love taking classes, and currently I'm taking a class that's being offered in a group called Online Card Classes, which makes sense, and it's offered by Jennifer McGuire and Christina Werner. And incidentally, Christina Werner is a former Stampin' Up demonstrator, employee actually. I think she was a demonstrator too. But anyway, they're focusing on embossing. And one thing that I hadn't really thought of doing, well, first of all, I love embossing. I love our embossing folders. And this makes a great background. So to continue with what I was saying before, you can use that as your background just to give it a little bit more depth and a little bit more interest to the card. But what I also learned is that you could take the embossing folder. Now, this is not really new, but you can ink up the embossing folder and get different images and have the ink show up on your cardstock. And one of the things that I had never done before was actually inking up the debossed side. In other words, the part that goes in. So this is the back side of the embossing folder. And when I did that, I used some, let's see, where's my piece? I think I cut it down. I used some white ink, and our white ink comes as an uninked pad. It's a foam pad, and then it comes with a re-inker because the ink dries very quickly. But I use that on the inside, the back inside of the embossing folder. And take a look at this. Now, granted, with white, you have to do it a few times. So this is running it through and inking it 3 times, but you can see that the ink is now pressed down. And because this is a 3D embossing folder, it gives you even more depth, where some of it is brighter than others, right? Some parts, because that's how the embossing folder is. So what you could also do is make this your background if you wanted to. Okay, and that stands out a lot more than this one did, right? See, that looks a lot different. Well, maybe not a lot different, but definitely looks different. Or you could even just stick with what we started with, and instead of using this piece of designer series paper, you can substitute one of the pieces for an embossed piece. So I think there are lots of creative opportunities that you could have with this particular sketch or template. And I think those were all the things that I was going to show you today, but because I'm taking this class, look for some more embossing fun things. I actually have only watched a few of the videos and have already learned a couple of things that I just hadn't really thought about before. So I will share some of those ideas with you sometime in my next classes. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or need more details on this, all the measurements and the supplies I used will be in the notes underneath the YouTube video. And I'm also going to get that up onto my blog so you can take a look there. So, but thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.